What's up, you guys? Ross Sapp here, managing editor of Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com. A very dressed down Ross Sapp. I'm rocking the no-collar look as I overcome a sinus infection, but I am joined by two well-dressed individuals in James Lynch and Showdown Joe. James, how are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry I missed last week. Had some stuff going on, but glad to be back and talk some fights.
We are also joined by one Showdown Joe, and Joe, I respect the Nike polo.
What's going on, guys? Hope everyone's doing okay. Hello, everybody on the live chat, top right of your screen. We missed James last week, but he's back. We're represented in our Canadian attire. I don't know what's going on with you Americans down there, Sean, but you can stick up your game, son.
I'm lucky to have made it to the show. But anyway, this is going to be one of our biggest shows. I couldn't miss this one. Couldn't miss it at all. We've got a lot to talk about. The Conor McGregor Khabib presser, UFC Sao Paulo, Thales, Leites, and Evan Dunham retire. Jon Jones' suspension. We got a big Bellator 206 show coming up. Joanna versus Valentina confirmed. I think the first thing we got to get right into is the Conor McGregor Khabib presser. I mean, to me, and it's wild to say this, but that's on par with the Jon Jones news. We get this presser. It got wild. James Lynch, as you noted, it's very clear that Conor McGregor has been reading Kareem Zaidan's writing and Mike Russell's writing. He did his research ahead of this presser, did he not?
He did, yeah, and he went right for the jugular the second, they got face-to-face and there was some talk. He definitely brought all this up, and that's Conor for you. The mind games are coming out. Nothing is off the table at this point, and he'll try and do whatever he can. And, it's unfortunate they didn't have the crowd there to sort of react to everything, but for, a media-based press conference that had no fans whatsoever, I thought this was very entertaining, and Conor really carried this thing. I mean, can you imagine if it was just Khabib, an opponent? This wouldn't have been nearly as noteworthy, but Conor always makes it a show, and he certainly delivered that. And I think to a lot of, like you were saying, a lot of people, kind of shocking that he was able to uncover, read Kareem Zaidan's work, which is something you wouldn't expect, but he's got to cover every angle, Sean, and he certainly did that.
Not only that, it seemed like throughout the press conference, Joe, that Conor remembered stuff that he had read, where he's like, when Khabib brought up that Conor does it for the money, and he's like, I don't do it. Wait a second. You took money from Nurmagomedov. Like, the light bulb went off, and he's like, oh, shit, got you in a corner.
Yeah, I mean, typical Conor, right? Conor did a fantastic job. I'll say this, though, James. I don't think Conor totally carried that press conference. We were just waiting for Khabib to have enough of what Conor was saying and actually chime in. And then when those two guys, when he actually turned, his body language turned, and they started going at each other, I thought that was absolutely fantastic. It would have been nice to have crowd there, a lot of people over there, but I understand, well, Dana White said it himself. We've already had problems here in New York. We don't want any more problems. In essence, you're going to have two different fan bases here that'll be more than happy to clash with each other. So, a couple things that Conor did and said where we're kind of like, nah, you shouldn't have did that, but it's Conor. So the whole purpose of Conor doing what he does is to sell fights, and I have it on good word that Khabib on his own sells a lot of pay-per-views, and we already know what Conor does. So this thing is going to be absolutely massive when it finally goes down.
So let's talk about some of those comments that I thought kind of crossed the line. Like, even in pro wrestling, I think when you say, I would kill you, implying that you would have murdered somebody, I think that doesn't sell me a pay-per-view necessarily. I mean, maybe to other people it does. I'm sure to at least one person it does. But James, I thought that was a little much because it didn't fit. It didn't fit. Now Conor was, it's crazy to say, in rare form for him, but I've not seen him that amped up even consistently for that period of time. But what did you think of those comments?
Yeah, they were out of line, but I think we have to remember this is very tribal at the essence of this thing. You've got Conor and the Irish fans, going against Khabib, who's, sort of this clean-cut Muslim guy. And, he really Khabib really wants to establish that he's a role model, and Conor doesn't care about any of that. He's Conor McGregor. He'll do whatever he wants. He can throw a dolly at a bus and still headline a card, months later. So to me, it just sort of really sort of highlighted the tribalism that heads into this fight, which is just two completely different personalities going toe-to-toe in one of the biggest fights in UFC history. Was it out of line? Yeah, but was it surprising? Not at all.
So there were no fans there, as you mentioned, Joe. They didn't want, and God, I couldn't have imagined a toned up Conor McGregor at that point. This was a 40-minute whiskey commercial, essentially, and a damn good one. I don't drink, but it was a damn good whiskey commercial. I'll give him that. Was there anything other than the aforementioned comments that you thought that Conor McGregor did that maybe crossed the line a little too much? Because Khabib was very calm and collected.
Yeah, well, it's the whole whiskey thing, right? When he offered Khabib a drink. Anyone that knows me on a personal level, I am not Captain Religion. I'm not the most religious guy, but I will respect anyone's religion and culture and stuff like that. And to offer a Muslim a drink, I think was uncalled for. I don't think Conor did it maliciously. I think he was, again, trying to promote his whiskey, which is cool, right? But I just thought that was like, oh, as soon as he did that, I'm like, that's not a good look. That's not good. Don't do it. But I don't think anyone's really going to be paying too close attention to that. But you know, having known Khabib or having met Khabib a few times, especially our time in Bahrain, I can attest that this guy is a fantastic. He's a joker. He's a prankster, except when it's time to train. I remember in that room there with Islam, Jose Shorty Torres was there, Frankie Edgar was there, Renzo Gracie was there, and that room lit up every time, you know, Khabib got his training on. So this is a guy that before and after is a fantastic joker. When it comes time to train, very serious individual. And it reminds me way back when an interview that the janitor did, Vladimir Metsychenko, talking about the trash talk in mixed martial arts and how it doesn't affect his people and the people on that side of the globe, because where they come from, there is no trash talking. The only trash talking is done with their fists. So, or they have to be able to back it up. You know, I think it was Vladimir basically had stated something to the effect that the reason why people don't talk is most people can't back it up. And if you can back it up, you better be ready to back it up. So that's, I guess, the mindset that Khabib has going into a situation when he's taking on, you know, who Dana White claims is the greatest trash talker of all time, even better than Muhammad Ali. You got to get that. It's a mental game when you're taking on Conor McGregor, and Conor's going to do anything and everything to get into Khabib's head, to the point where when they do compete, as we've seen in the past, Sean, you and I have talked about it so many times, half the opponents are so emotional fighting Conor McGregor that they end up making mistakes.
Yeah. Well, Conor McGregor did not make a mistake in somehow swinging well, not somehow, it's very obvious how he did it. His proper 12 Irish whiskey is going to be on the canvas of all of his fights. This is a brilliant move, James.
It is something we've never seen. And, you know, in light of everything that we've sort of talked about here with, you know, the trash talk and everything, Conor's a good businessman. I mean, how many fighters are going to have something that they own as a sponsor in the octagon and everything else? This is just great on Conor McGregor. And maybe this will pave the way for other fighters. Probably not, because there's not a lot of fighters like Conor McGregor and having that much power. But certainly, you know, I saw a lot of people wanting to buy the whiskey and getting it. And I mean, he's a good businessman. And I think the brand that he has is so strong that he could sell literally anything, and I think you'd see fans buy it.
Yeah, and I don't see a lot of stuff about McGregor fast or his suits necessarily, at least outside of his social media. But the whiskey, I think, has actually made a splash, no pun intended. But it is a very savvy move to make this happen for Conor McGregor. I thought it was very smart of him to do. I mean, why not? He promoted it heavily. I had some people who were a little bit offended about him offering Khabib a drink, Joe, and then calling Khabib, quote, a proper backwards cunt, end quote, when he said that he did not drink. Your thoughts?
Again, it's difficult for me to digest and put forth an opinion about a guy that I've seen personally not drink a thing. I get what Conor's doing. Conor's going to say and do whatever it takes to get into his opponent's head and sell pay-per-views. That whole press conference is a gold mine, and I'm speaking on behalf of potentially, you know, mainstream media outlets. That press conference is a gold mine, because sometimes for the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock news, you need the best clips, and that thing was full of Conor McGregor clips that they could piece together and put together a story to promote the event. So Conor's going to say what he's going to say, and kudos to him. I thought it was crazy afterwards. I think Dana was pretty upset with Ali afterwards, because they weren't able to get that proper picture and that face-off. Or they got the face-off, but not the one where they can actually look at the crowd, because Ali was saying certain stuff, Khabib's manager, and then Conor went off on Ali and started spilling some information that not many people know. So interesting to note that, you know, it doesn't matter who it is. Conor's going to take shots at them when he's in that zone, when he's in that switch. He's going to say and do whatever he wants. It's when he turns it off, we'll see. But when does Conor really turn it off when you think about it?
From the Khabib Nurmagomedov perspective, I thought he dominated. And he's a guy who has held his own very fairly, at least in a scrum setting, a solo press conference setting, but English isn't his first language. He didn't respond to a lot of stuff. He sure as hell didn't respond to the more controversial aspects of this press conference, James. But he brought up the Artem Lobov thing about how he got slapped and didn't slap back. And I'm thinking, wasn't he surrounded by like several people? Like, wasn't he
12 guys? Yeah.
12 guys. And it's not often you can look at Conor McGregor in this situation, especially the bus attack situation, and say, well, no, I get Conor's side. But he was like, you came out with 40 guys. And I'm like, he flew from Dublin. He flew overseas to do this. And he was going to a media day where he knew that everybody's team was. Like, I don't think there's any debating. Conor McGregor wanted at Khabib or whatever the situation may be there. But it seemed a little weird to me for Khabib to say, why didn't your buddy slap back? And why do you have 40 people? I mean, did that not seem incredibly hypocritical to you?
Yeah, it was. And that's something that seems to get glossed over with the fact of what happened with, McGregor throwing the dolly. But to begin with, none of this would have happened if Khabib and his crew didn't corner Artem Lobov in the hotel. Like, what are you doing? I mean, you've got, Artem Lobov's got a fight. I mean, Khabib was defending the title at that, or he's going to be fighting for the title at that point. Why are you doing all this extra unnecessary stuff during fight week? You should be, Joe, and I agree with you here, Khabib, very focused fighter, obviously, in the zone. But during fight week, why are you going after Artem Lobov? Like, to me, that shows a little bit of, not very good character on his part, where he's going in and, basically mobbing some guy. And then, of course, what happened next with the dolly and everything. But, yeah, I just think it is very hypocritical. And I think the whole thing was a mess. But, I mean, had Khabib not done that, I'm convinced we wouldn't have seen a McGregor, bus attack had that not happened.
Bingo. You just completely nailed your point perfectly at the very end. Khabib was planting a seed. He wants that Conor McGregor fight. Well, what better way to get Conor McGregor than to go after one of his close friends competing on the card, get on his nerves and say, hey, take one of those things. And now Conor's like, yeah, you want to do that to my friend? I'm coming out there. And we all saw what happened after James Dolly and stuff like that. Boom, fights get made. So I think Khabib made the right call, despite being a tad hypocritical in the press conference here. But I think he made the right call because, in essence, he got what he wanted. He's going to get a massive payday out of it.
He ultimately does. Yeah, sorry, just quickly, but doesn't this sort of go against his whole persona of being this role model? I mean, that's not a very good look if you're someone who's going to go. I get what you're saying, Joe, in terms of the fight itself, building it up and everything like that. But it sort of goes against this persona that he's trying to be, which is this, role model. I don't drink, I don't swear, I don't do all these things, and you're doing this. I mean, it's just out of character, and it doesn't. To me, it didn't look good because it just. I get that you get this end result, but it still didn't look good for him from a character perspective. That's all.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor brought his own titles. He brought his own whiskey. He thought that they weren't going to let him in with a glass bottle, so he smuggled in one inside his coat as well. I thought that was very funny. But Khabib didn't really say a lot. He didn't really say a lot. It was mostly Conor talking, and then when Khabib talked, he would get mimicked. There would be the Muppet sounds and all that. But what Khabib did say was that Conor tapped several times. However, when I look at this from a stylistic standpoint, and I think, man, April Trujillo had about 20 opportunities to get back up to his feet. What does that say to you, Joe? Because generally, a Conor McGregor, if you give him 20 chances on the feet, something bad's going to happen.
Yes, absolutely. That's one thing that Khabib better pay close attention to. If you take Conor McGregor down, you better hold him there for a very long time. If not, if you get him down, if you're able to get that takedown for the duration of the round, if you have to go that far, you better keep him there and punish him and punish him and punish him. Because if you don't, we all know that on a surface level, this fight breaks down very, very simply. Conor with that left bomb, Khabib with the takedown, maul and brawl. That's just simply the way this fight potentially is going to turn out. I mean, it's MMA. Anything can happen. Can Conor McGregor knock out? Can Khabib Nurmagomedov knock out Conor McGregor with a punch? Of course he can. It's a fight. Anything can happen, and vice versa. Can Conor surprise Khabib when he's dazed, take him down, TKO him, and submit him? Of course he can. He's got the skills as well. But from Khabib's perspective, yeah, you take Conor down, you better keep him down because that left hand is something special. We all know that.
James, towards the end of the press conference, Ali Abdelaziz, who is one of the more controversial agents in MMA, him and Malki Kawa are just this week they're in the shit, so to speak. Now, Malki Kawa has a very colorful past in which has been covered extensively by Mike Russell, but it is a different story. All due respect to Mike Russell, I love his work. It is a different story when Mike Russell writes about it and when Conor McGregor, the megaphone, talks about it. That I don't think that's something that Ali would want.
No, and you know, there's anyone that's had any association with Mike Russell has been warned from Ali. I can tell you a fellow reporter who you know, basically just cited Mike Russell for something that had nothing to do with Ali, and he got a phone call. So I mean, it's one of those things where there's a lot of damaging stuff there, and it elevated with the fact that Conor, you know, said that, because everyone's asking who this Noah guy is, and there's all this information out there, and it's right in Mike Russell's lap. Mike Russell's followers doubled this last week in terms of you know, his coverage. And the timing of it's good as well, because I believe the podcast, which is going to explain all of this in an audio form, is actually going to be dropping in October. So it's pretty crazy what's happening right now. The timing of all this, no one expected this. I mean, I don't even think Mike or Kareem expected this to happen, but it's one of those things where, you know, Ali poked the wrong bear and the information got out, and now everyone knows about it. So it's crazy.
Well, I think it's great, because we need more of that. We need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, across pro wrestling, MMA, boxing, any of those things, we need the Mike Russells of the world. We need the Kareems of the world who do that extensive work. And I saw somebody saying today, I think it was to Mike on Twitter, "Oh, you're doing this for clicks." That doesn't get clicks.
Mm-hmm.
That I can tell you from experience, the 6,000 word articles don't typically get the clicks. It's usually something along the lines of The Rock posts selfie in gym and shouts out Stone Cold Steve Austin, something like that. I mean, if you want to accuse somebody of trying to get clicks, maybe that, as opposed to something, a really deep dive like this. Conor McGregor also brought up the money filter or funneled in by Magomedov, and how he said, "There's not a bean left." That Irish slang really works.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say here? It's he's just hitting at all angles, and I think that Conor, for you know, in general, is just a guy that you know, he's not coming to this unprepared. And one other thing I wanted to comment too about earlier, I mean, it's not like Khabib could have ever won this press conference in terms of the trash talk. I mean, he just has to do what he's doing, just stay and be the above the fray type guy, where it's like, I'm not going to respond, I'm not going to react, I'm not going to take your drink, I'm not going to do that. Be that guy, because that, like I said, it's tribalism at the end of the day here. You've got the, you know, boisterous Irish crowd against the humble role model, you know, so to speak, Muslim crowd, and that's what this is, and that's why this fight's going to be huge, because there's two sides of the coin here. It's almost like you can pick your good and evil here between either side, but that's the way fans are invested. That's, at the end of the day, that's what you want. If you want people to buy your pay-per-views, you need to be invested, and there's so many different storylines here that people will be invested in heading into this fight, aside from the fact that the matchup's just amazing in itself.
We also had some huge news this week. Jon Jones, his suspension is up at the end of October. He will be eligible to return. Here's a crazy thing to think, guys. If he gets a fight in this year, but who knows if he does, he will not have missed a calendar year. He'll actually have fought 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, which is unbelievable to think of. Jon Jones is a guy who wrapped a car around a pole drunk, hit and run, messed up, failed an out-of-competition drug test that probably shouldn't have been made public, failed 2 subsequent tests. It's just that it's repeated mistake after repeated mistake, and he has wasted years of his perceived prime. As I look at things, Jon Jones is 31 years old and is likely going to fight at heavyweight in the future. He is way younger than the majority of heavyweights, which is horrifying to think of. Joe, it was revealed that he basically turns over state's evidence. He's effectively a snitch, regardless of what Malkikawa says. However, it was also found by an arbitrator that he didn't knowingly ingest a substance. He didn't intend to cheat. And that was the case his last drug test, too. My question to you is, Joe, what state's evidence is he supposed to turn over if he's not knowingly ingesting shit?
Bingo, right? Bingo. It's so, you look at this and the moving parts, now that we know what's happening, or we can assume, in essence, what this state evidence is. To me, you're ratting people out. And, you know, I could be completely wrong. And I said it from day one when this whole thing went down. I'm the wrong guy to ever accuse anyone, because I don't have that steroid eye. I don't have that juice eye like we had when we had Luke on the show before, Sean. I'm as guilty of a Canadian as giving someone the benefit of the doubt as anyone out there. But at the same time, Jon Jones, the second time that this happened, I kind of sided with him. I'm like, and we had the long debates, or more or less conversations, Sean, about, sometimes you can buy something over the counter and you just really don't know. But I think at this point here, they're going to start looking, and I think it was Melky that mentioned that, moving forward, anything John's going to take, he's going to first send it to the UFC, have them verify it, then also to USADA, have them verify it before he even ingests it. Then again, how fast is that going to happen? But this type of it's just the story itself, the twists and turns, the ups and downs, the lateral is just it's crazy. So I don't even know really what to think of it right now. I mean, James, you tell me. I mean, when you first heard this news, it must have just shook your head.
Yeah, it did. And I think the thing too with USADA, unfortunately, is there's been a lot of inconsistencies, right? In terms of, things that happen with certain fighters and whether they, knowingly took it or didn't, or, there's been some mistakes on USADA's part where they've come out and said, hey, we screwed this up. And then there's other times where it's blatant, where someone, you have like an Adam Hunter who's supposed to make his UFC debut and he's got, 6 or 7 different substances that he's tested positive for. I just brought him up because he actually just fought last week. But it's one of those things where, I don't think this was that surprising in the sense that it's Jon Jones. You would figure there was some way, some maneuver, something that would get him back in the octagon in a timely manner because he's Jon Jones. I mean, if this is Tim Means, who, unfortunately had a bad situation with USADA, if this happened to him, he's not in the UFC anymore.
James, you talked to Gegard Mousasi, who right before saying, I'm glad Jon Jones is back, said, I'm not fighting Lyoto Machida without a drug test.
I know.
Machida failed for like DHEA.
Yeah.
It's not like Turinabol and all this stuff, man. So I want to see Jon Jones back as a guy who runs a pro wrestling, MMA, boxing website. Cool. We're talking about this right now. We got good numbers going right now because of this. That's neat. But from a moral standpoint, I talked to Filthy Tom Lawler yesterday. He was not happy. And he just spent 2 years of his life. And then the UFC cut him afterwards. Keep in mind, his last fight, they told him, well, we cut you in part to your last loss. That was a very close fight on a very high-profile card against a top 10 UFC light heavyweight. There are a lot of people who have reason to be upset. And people say, I've heard people say, well, why hasn't this been offered to anybody else? It has been. It's just that Mirko Cro Cop said, I ain't no snitch. Does that surprise you, Joe, after years of interacting with Mirko Cro Cop?
No. Yeah. Mirko's Mirko. I can't wait to see him this weekend, what kind of mood he's going to be in. He's facing a young buck in Roy Martinez. But yeah, Mirko's Mirko.
What is it? Right leg, cemetery, left leg, hospital. And then I guess
right leg, hospital, left leg, cemetery, yeah.
And then if you talk out of your mouth, you end up in a ditch, I guess. That's Mirko's way of thinking. It was also revealed throughout this process that Jon Jones used cocaine before and after the drug test, James. Does this surprise you?
Well, I think there was a certain point with Jones where, he could, he basically was invincible. I mean, we heard the stories, where it comes out after the fact where, he's partying a week before the Gustafsson fight. It's crazy to me. I think when you do get to a certain point as a celebrity or an athlete or whatever, you do sort of have that God status. And I think, one of the things they don't teach you as a professional athlete is how to manage money, how to stay out of trouble, how to do all these things. They don't teach you any of that. They just give you a boatload of money. It's like, here, hopefully it all works out. So, Jon is still not a man at this point in terms of, some of the responsibilities he needs to make. So hearing that, no, it does not surprise me.
No, he's a father of 3 and 4 girls. Like he's got to be a lot more responsible than that. At the same time, James makes a good point because no matter how much money they make, no one, I don't know of any true educational system that teaches people what to do with their money. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're taught. It doesn't matter if you respect the fact that, you should be a role model. You have to understand what position you're in. People are viewing the content that you're putting out there, and everything that you do is going to be highlighted because the media just wants the stories, whether it's good or bad. At the end of the day, it's up to the individual to care or to not care. And if they care, they're going to be as, prim and proper, and at least in the public eye as possible. With Jon doing the cocaine stuff and partying and doing this and doing that, you know, it depends on who you're around. If you're around the people that will keep their mouth shut, you're going to be fine. If you're going to be around people and anyone, and you don't care because it's not a UFC event or a media event, man, there's people that have phones, man. They will record things and they will rat you out to make a dollar. So you always got to be careful in anything and everything you do. The minute your life turns into you know, public spotlight.
There's something that I really have to approach here. I say we. James interviews Colby Covington about once every 6 weeks, 2 months, because there's always something to talk to him about. And so often he says things and I'm like, man, this guy's so full of shit. And then like 2 weeks later, what he talks about happens, or something similar, or something that you think that he's saying to drive heat or just create a point, like something that really mirrors that situation in which he's speaking starts to come true. And we saw this out of Chael Sonnen for years. This was something that we saw out of him. And now I think Chael Sonnen is one of the great analysts, at least from a psychological standpoint, in MMA on his podcast. James, this is becoming a repeating thing with Colby, where he says these wild things that at least I thought, I'm like, man, this guy. But then it happens. Have you been noticing this trend?
I have. Well, I think these fighters, they know stuff that we don't. I mean, behind the scenes that just doesn't get reported. And there's stuff you hear and it's like, is it newsworthy? Are we going to report it? And you don't want to get in trouble if you are wrong. So, I mean, these fighters, they can say whatever they want because there's nothing's going to come back on them unless it's in their own gym. But there's stuff in the know. I mean, I'm sure we all at this table here share stories all the time of things that we just can't talk about because it's sort of not appropriate.
But Colby does.
I know but he's got nothing to lose at this point. People legitimately hate Colby. They want to kill him. I mean, you should see all the comments we see all the time on the videos, even the pros picks where he doesn't give an answer. People are so infuriated by the fact that he just won't give anyone any respect. Like he is a polarizing figure and apparently good at predicting things as well. So maybe you should buy a lottery ticket.
So I talked to people, and I may have mentioned this last week on the podcast. I talked to people that he talked to backstage at Raw, and I was like, I brought up what he had said. And the people that I talked to said, just let Colby say whatever he wants because it's good for him and it's good for us. So they understand too. And Colby understands the entertainment aspect. Back to Jones. Joe, who does he fight? Because he's not fighting at UFC 230, allegedly. But here we are 5 weeks away. No main event for UFC 230. So this is a bit of a double here. Who does he fight and who fights at UFC 230?
It's tough to say because, you know, obviously he wants, you know, Daniel Cormier or Gustafsson, and we both know that's going to be the DC fight ain't going to happen. And, you know, the Gustafsson, I'm not even going to bother finishing off that sentence before, you know, Ross Sapp absolutely rips me a new one. So it's tough to say who he's going to fight next. I'd like to see, I mean, pretty sure Jan Blachowicz would step up in a heartbeat, but is that really going to sell a lot of pay-per-views? It might be the only option he has. He's already fought OSP. It's tough. Vulcan's booked. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know, to be honest with you. I can't even. If some way, somehow, Gustafsson can get up there. Yeah, if not, it's going to have to be someone that jumps up from middleweight that's got a name, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Joe Gustafsson or John Gustafsson and UFC all went pretty hard on the remember 5 years ago when we fought hosts over the last week. Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think they lock horns again next?
I think it's possible. I think at this point the options are very limited in terms of who Jones fights. You know, we're hearing Dana. I know whatever Dana says doesn't necessarily happen, but I mean, we're hearing early next year is when he's going to fight. And if that is the case, then, you know, your options open a little bit. We can take DC off the table because I don't think he's going to fight anyone other than Brock Lesnar. I mean, you have this fight on the table. Why jeopardize that, even if it is Jon Jones? I think Gustafsson's probably the logical choice, or they go with something completely out of the blue. What about Stipe Miocic? I mean, you know, I know he wants his heavyweight title back, but I mean, that's an intriguing fight at heavyweight. If Jones wins that fight, he fights DC at heavyweight. I don't know. So
a couple of things in the Brock Lesnar deal. He got tested by USADA again last week. WWE was very surprised that he was willing to work for them beyond SummerSlam, and has. He's literally wrestling at Crown Jewel in early November, I believe it is. Or maybe it's Super Showdown. I can't. It's one of the two, but he's got a WWE title match coming up next too. So there are some people who speculate, and I've not heard one way or the other, but maybe Lesnar's like, I'd rather fight Jones than Cormier, even if there's no title on the line. Joe, I would really have to feel for Cormier if that happened.
Ooh, my goodness. Can you imagine if that actually happens? Like, that would be, I wouldn't say catastrophic, but it'd be so bad for DC, who would absolutely deserve and want and should get that fight with Brock Lesnar. But if Brock wants a piece of Jon Jones and Jon Jones already called him out, I mean, that right there is just I mean, realistically speaking, and I don't know if James and I can really answer this, because we live in a country where we don't really see as much UFC content as you would see on Fox right now, with DC being on there. But you tell me, Sean, which one would do more pay-per-view buys, Jon versus Brock or DC versus Brock? I would go with the former rather than the latter.
Yeah, I would too. And there is the intrigue of the title too. Yeah. Brock becoming the champion, and who knows what his WWE status will be by then. But I would agree. But for UFC 230, what do they have, guys? I mean, personally, I would, if I got in a real pickle, which the UFC has been known to put themselves in, I'd be like, you know what, guys? Maybe don't cut that extra 10 pounds. We've got a replica belt laying around somewhere. Let's do a 165-pound division that all of our fighters are begging to do, mind you. James, what do you think?
I mean, if there's a time to do the 165-pound division, it's now. This is the perfect opportunity. There is nothing else at this point. Tyron Woodley's not fighting. Jon Jones is not fighting. What are you going to do? I mean, the options are limited. They just announced the women's fight, Joanna and Valentina for Toronto. So that's out of the equation. TJ and Henry Cejudo, I don't think that's going to happen. You can't do Holloway and Ortega this early either. It's got to be for, a title at potentially 165, or maybe they don't do a title and they just run the gamut and they just hope that Diaz is a big enough name that they just decide to do a non-title fight for a pay-per-view. I mean, I think when this fight was announced, they just assumed that it was going to be the main event just because of the name value there. But I understand there is no title on the line, so they always have that thing. It has to be for a title if it's a pay-per-view, right? So I see it being Diaz versus Poirier. My only question is it for a title or not? I have no idea, but I think Diaz and Poirier is going to be the main event.
One fight that is for a title, Valentina Shevchenko, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Do you guys remember back when people said that this should have been the fight to determine the champion anyway? Because I sure do. And they walked 15 miles to drive one. We're getting the fight. Joe, it's just the right fight. It's just the right fight.
I mean, is there a debate out there that says it's not? I mean, unless you're a Nico fan, this is the fight. This is the fight that we all want to see. This is the fight that the vast majority of people want to, see, and it's a great scrap, and it will determine the best woman in the world at 125 pounds. Despite the fact that Joanna competes at a lower weight division, she's probably fighting at her natural weight at 125, and despite the fact that Valentina, for the most part, has competed her whole career at 135. 125 should be her weight class. So, yeah, I don't know. Is there really a debate out there that this fight should never have taken place from day one?
And James, as you talked to Gegard Mousasi, he was pretty critical of the women's flyweight division, at least Nico Montano headlining it. We got a nice little article headline out of that. Thank you, Gegard. But this seems like the right fight. It seemed like, if anything, that tough season should have been used to set up the first contender.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, from what I'm seeing on social media, actually, Joe, there is a lot of people upset by this, mainly the flyweight division and the people who feel that because they've, there's people who've competed at flyweight that they deserve a better shot. But I'm with you guys. To me, it's like they're talking about Jessica Ai. Do we forget that, like a year or two ago, she was on a 4-fight losing streak. She's won 2 in a row. What division do you win 2 fights in a row and you get a title shot? It's just unheard of. You've got Sajara Eubanks, who again looked good on The Ultimate Fighter, but missed weight. She got to win over Lauren Murphy, but again, her record overall isn't that great. Like, this is, to me, I don't have an issue with this. If there was like an undefeated, prospect who looked amazing and was knocking people out or something, then fair enough. But there isn't there isn't a clear-cut contender at flyweight at this point. So I don't have an issue with that. It seemed that the reason this didn't happen sooner was because of Joanna. I mean, I've at the Calgary card, we saw the interview with her. I asked her, why don't you just go up to flyweight? You lost to Rose twice. What is there to gain to fight Tisha Torres? She was dead set, and she had it convinced in her head. I mean, we were asking her questions like this. Do you feel like a win over Tisha is going to get you a title shot? Absolutely. It's like, what?
Yeah.
You just lost twice. There's just something in her head that just felt that she didn't lose to Rose the second time, and that the first fight was a fluke. So in her head, it was that. So the delay on this is on Joanna's part. they obviously made this happen, which is great. It's an awesome fight. There is history between the two of them. Valentina, I believe, beat Joanna 3 times in Muay Thai. So, I mean, this was ages ago, and they're different fighters now, but there is, you know, they can play up that storyline. And let's not forget, guys, this fight almost happened in International Fight Week 2 years ago when Amanda Nunes was out of her fight hours before against Valentina. Joanna was there and offered to step up. So that fight could have happened then. Didn't end up happening. But this is a fight I think people want to see. And I'm intrigued because I think Joanna could potentially look better at 125. She does cut a lot of weight to get 115. Let's see how she throws down with Valentina.
Well, those people that are upset about this fight in general, I mean, just tell them to put up the money. Put up money on an investment, and you know, whatever amount of money. Let's say you want to put up $1,000. Do you want to get $1,000 back? Do you want to get $2,000 back? Do you want to get $5,000 back? You want to get as much money as possible for when you spend money. And the UFC spends money putting on these events. Each event is its own incorporated entity. Okay, you need to understand that. So the money invested into putting on an event needs to have maximum return. You get maximum return when you put on a big fight that most people want to see, not what's right for the mixed martial arts rankings. I get that. If you're an MMA purist and you believe the right person deserves a title shot based on their ranking, I get that. That's, you know, that's sport. The UFC is not a sport. It's a business, and the business is about making money. And the money fight in this division is Joanna and Valentina. I mean, case closed in my opinion.
As we look down those rankings, number 1 is Shevchenko. Number 2, Montano. We know what happened with her. Shit up 25 pounds over on fight week. Chikagian has won, but hasn't done herself any favors in impressing fans or UFC brass. She does not have exciting fights. Eubanks didn't make it to her title fight. So what more do you need? Alexis Davis just got beat by Chikagian. I like Liz Carmouche just fine. That's a possible title contender given that she wins down the road. Modafferi just lost the title fight. Lauren Murphy had a stay of execution, essentially, by jumping to this division, as did Jessica I. And then we're getting into Jessica Rose Clark, Ashley Evans-Smith, and Joanne Calderwood. Okay, yeah, I'm cool with Joanna getting this title shot. I was cool with UFC Sao Paulo this weekend, too. We had some good stuff on that show. Thiago Santos defeated Eric Anders at light heavyweight. Eric Anders is becoming like him and Cerrone, like that type of guy where he just shows up and fights. From a skill level, I won't put him there, but you know, I'd give it by the end of next year before him and Sam Alvey end up fighting each other on about a day and a half notice at whatever weight. That's just the way it is. He doesn't care who he fights. He doesn't care what the notice is, but he ended up getting rewarded nicely with a $50,000 bonus. But he effectively got tired and got elbowed into, I don't want to say into submission. He collapsed, James.
He did. And that's the question. Was it because of the elbows? Was it because of the exhaustion? I think it was a bit of both in that regard. You know, I've seen a lot of people online say that this was a mistake for Eric Anders. You know, he's got another loss in his resume. I disagree. I think his stock went up in this fight. You know, he not only won fans over because this was a great fight and he had his moments where he almost had that submission on Santos as well. But it's in a different division. It doesn't affect his standing at middleweight. I think this was a win-win. Yeah, it was a scary sight to see him collapse twice, but you know, he kind of made that joke after the fact. He said, "Oh, I haven't been that tired since my wedding night." You know, so it's one of those things where I think he won fans over. And to be honest, and I've been very vocal about this, and I like Eric a lot. I think I've been interviewing him since his second pro fight. I mean, he did not look good in that Tim Williams fight. People glanced over the fact that leading up to that knockout he had against Williams, it was a pretty awful performance on his part. This redeemed himself, in my opinion. He won fans over. It was in Brazil. You know, there's a great picture of him and Santos after the fight. I think Anders definitely played this right. And again, he makes some extra cash to boot as well. So I think this was a good move for Eric Anders. I don't think it affects him at middleweight. And yeah, I think he won more fans, if anything.
Joe, do we see Thiago Santos stick around at light heavyweight? I would if I were him.
The way the division is, yeah, if I was him, I would stay there. But either at middleweight or at light heavyweight, this is a guy that has absolutely no respect for the human body. This guy does not care what his striking does to an opponent. I mean, this guy is... I remember GSP telling me one time, the only reason why the referee is in the octagon is to protect us from killing each other. Okay? Like, Thiago Santos... that guy's nuts. I mean, he just strikes with sheer venom and power and just no regard whatsoever for the human body. And, it's if you're a prize fighting fan, he's one of my faves to watch because he's just brutal. Like, he's just insane. So either at 205 or a 185, Sean, James, I don't care. Sign me up next time he fights. I want to watch. And this Jimmy Manuwa fight for me would have been freaking fantastic because Jimmy Manuwa, when he's on point, woo-wee, that guy can throw some bombs as well. That would have been a good scrap to see. And unfortunately for Thiago, if he'd have beat Manuwa, his stock would have truly skyrocketed then.
A few more potential fan favorites. Zaleski dos Santos, one with a big flying knee. You had Alex Oliveira making short work of Carlo Pedersoli. Those are some, it's hard to say that Cowboy Oliveira is an emerging name, but he's still hanging around near that fringe top 15. Dos Santos is in it. But Antonio Rogério Nogueira defeats Sam Alvey. Nogueira is, let me check, 132 years old.
Happy birthday.
Yes, just turned 132 today. He's actually 42. Getting the win. Another, I hate to say it's not a stay of execution for him because he's won 2 of his last 3. He'll fight as long as it becomes irresponsible. But James, did you see Anderson Silva's reaction to this win on Instagram?
I did not. What I imagine it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
I need to post it. But what are you thinking of Rogério Nogueira getting it done? 42 years old over Sam Alvey, who isn't a top guy or anything, but finds ways to win.
Well, let's talk about the fact Sam Alvey's only been knocked out. This is his second knockout loss in his career. He's got a 33-11 record. The only other guy to knock him out was Brunson, and that was kind of a questionable knockout as well. So this was a clean, good knockout for him. What do I think? I think this was icing on the cake of a really good card. I mean, this is, the Pride fans come out of the woodwork when something like this happens because, let's be honest, Nogueira's career in the UFC has been pretty lackluster with the, time off, the injuries, it couldn't have gone worse for him. But he does have wins like this one that you kind of look back on and go, wow, that's amazing. Now, what does he do from this at 42 years old? Probably not much, but it's nice. I mean, if I'm him, just retire, just go into the sunset. You knocked out Sam Alvey, good for you. But yeah, it was just a nice thing to sort of, add to this card, which was pretty good fight night card, which was sort of unexpected.
We see 2 guys that are going off into the sunset, and Evan Dunham, Thales Leites. Hector Lombard probably riding off into the UFC sunset at the very least, Joe. He has, let's see,
6 losses.
6 straight losses, and he is unbeaten, or he is winless in his last 7 because 1 got overturned. He has been a monumental disappointment in the UFC, Joe. But as far as Lombard, Leites, and Dunham, your memories of all 3 of them, essentially.
I always talk about Evan Dunham being so tall. The first time I met him, I didn't realize he was that tall at Extreme Couture. Frank Trigg and I were recording a whole bunch of stuff, James, for Fight School 101s. We were recording for UFC Central. And the first time Evan comes in with his daughter, I was like, holy smokes, this guy's tall. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. But smiley, happy-go-lucky. With Thales Leites, we actually recorded a fight. I fought him. I fought Damian Maia and Kenny Florian one time on the show. I got my butt handed to me, but Thales was absolutely classic and let me do whatever I wanted. And he was always really good because he had a local guy here that had a company that was sponsoring him. And at the time, Leites was in and around the middleweight title fight when he fought Anderson Silva. So he was the ambassador for the product. So he was absolutely great. Hector Lombard, I got nothing really bad to say about him other than nothing really bad. I mean, there was one time I was in Vancouver, your town, James. I was in the hotel and I was just working out. It was my cardio day. I was on the treadmill just doing my thing and walks up right behind me, says hi, joins me on the treadmill next to me. And I think he was cutting weight at the time. And we just, we're there for half an hour shooting the breeze and, great guy. But in terms of his UFC career, we were all expecting much, much more when he signed over from Bellator. He came up with he had such a highlight reel career in Bellator that when he came to the UFC, it was great when he first came because Michael Bisping took a shot at him, calling him, I'll say a little person. I won't use the word beginning with M that Michael used, but he called Hector Lombard a little person and, looked forward to beating him up. But Hector kept his mouth shut and just kept training, kept going in there, just couldn't perform the way he was performing in Bellator. But yeah, I think this may be the end of the line for his UFC career for sure.
Lombard, one of those mini Bellator champions who never defended their titles. It was really inexplicable and weird. That's one of the reasons why the tournament format didn't work out so well. The thing I remember most about Thales Leites isn't necessarily the disappointing performance against Anderson Silva and the follow-up that got him released, as much as him reinventing himself after the release winning, I think, 6 of 7 fights. He improved his striking a little bit, then came back to the UFC and I think won 4 or 5 straight fights, to the point to where he was getting big fights with like Bisping and Mousasi and people like that. But hope for the best for those guys as well. Francisco Trinaldo did send Evan Dunham off. Charles Oliveira picks up a history-making win. Renata Souza, she gets a win over Alex Chambers. Those are names to watch out for. But the main guy I want to talk about on this Sao Paulo show before we preview Bellator, Renan Barao. He is 31 years old right now. He went 32-1 before losing to Dillashaw. And before the USADA era, he was 33-2 with 1 no contest. Since then, he is 1-5. His one win, a decision over Felipe Nover, James. I don't know that anybody near this age, you can point out people in their 40s, like all day. I don't know if there's been anybody at this age, maybe Johnny Hendricks, who's a little bit older, who have been impacted more since then. I'm not going to correlate the two necessarily, but it's hard not to. Since that has been instituted, man, he's fallen off a cliff.
He has. It's not the same fighter that we used to see. Make your own conclusions from that how you want. But I mean, Joe and I were there when he, beat Eddie Wineland in Toronto. I mean, this guy, Dana White, Joe Rogan said this guy was the pound for pound best. And now to see the fall he's had is pretty incredible. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Andre Ewell, who, put on a great performance. Here's a guy who's turned his career around. I think he's won 10 of his last 11 fights now. He was not supposed to win the CES title. He ended up winning it. That's what got him the call to the UFC. So good story for him, he was pretty much homeless when he got the UFC call.
Yeah, great story for him.
So that was great to see. But for Barao, I mean, Eric Silva comes to mind, I guess, as another one who, I mean, I guess he got a few wins here and there, but he's another guy who just sort of fell off the planet. But I mean, no one to this degree, like even Hendricks, like he was a champion and everything, but he was never like considered like a pound for pound great, whereas Barao was. I mean, Barao went, and it's not like Barao beat nobodies. I mean, we're talking like Faber, Michael McDonald, Scott Jorgensen, Brad Pickett. I mean, these are all really legit good competitions. So it's one of those things. He's got to be cut from the UFC at this point. I was kind of hinting this morning, I think he probably goes to Bellator, and I don't think he wins there either. I think this is the end of Renan Barao. I don't think he's at a high level anymore for whatever reason, and it's pretty incredible to watch.
I think there's 3 things that we need to pay attention to.
Joe, do you smell that?
Tell me.
That's Barao fighting a pit bull brother by next year. Bellator just foaming at the mouth. Let's get him in there with a pit bull brother and main event 9 shows with it immediately.
I mean, I think there's 3 things that we need to look at with Renan Barao. I think, Sean, you touched on it first, pre-USADA era versus post-USADA era. That's one thing that people will probably take a look at, conspiracy theory there or not. I think the second thing is after those fights with TJ Dillashaw, and getting brutally knocked out the way he has, does that turn a fighter into being far more gun-shy and not really wanting to exchange as much because he knows that he can get knocked out again and that his career is at stake? They're not going to take as many risks. And of course, training at Novyu now for as long as he did, MMA mileage. MMA mileage is a real thing. It's not exactly scientifically proven, but you can look at the numbers and say to yourself, oh man, he's much older than what his driver's license says. His body's much older. So those are the 3 things when guys like Renan Barao start having this are on this free fall. I think that's what basically happens. There's a pre-USADA era, post-USADA era, getting knocked out the way he did, and beaten by TJ Dillashaw the way he did, and then just simply MMA mileage.
We'll spend about a minute on this. What's more impressive? Royce Gracie's previous submission record where he was facing way less talented and experienced fighters, but maybe some much bigger than him, or Charles Oliveira's UFC submissions record, Joe?
I think Charles is probably more, only because you mentioned that when Royce was doing it, nobody really knew jiu-jitsu. Nowadays, everyone knows jiu-jitsu, knows the submission game, so I would assume it's far more difficult, although Royce did give up a fair amount of size back in the day. But if it wasn't for Royce, Charles wouldn't be able to do this. So,
James?
Yeah, I got to go Oliveira. Just the age and everything too, and just and granted, I know he fought a guy who had lost a few times by submission, but still, nonetheless, very impressive for Oliveira to do what he does best, getting those submissions.
It's like when people talk about NBA players from the past, and they're like, "Yeah, but Wilt Chamberlain was playing against plumbers." It's kind of the same sometimes with Royce Gracie. He was fighting some plumbers. We have or Bellator 206 rather. Pretty damn good show. You got Aaron Pico against Leandro Higo. James, I think this is a monumental test for Aaron Pico. You talk about bringing him up slowly. I don't know if this is bringing him up slowly, man. He's facing a guy who just fought for the Bellator bantamweight title, is 18-4.
Yeah.
Has experience in RFA, LFA. This is a hell of a test for Aaron Pico, James. If he passes this, I can't see him not getting a Bellator title shot.
I think Bellator must know something we don't. Here's the thing with Higo. Let's be real here. And granted, the competition has been very high level, but he's been a disappointment in Bellator. I mean, he missed weight against Dantas. He ended up losing a split. That was his debut. He won the fight over Tamaglio. Then he gets submitted in the first round by Darian Caldwell. I know Darian Caldwell is a great fighter, but that was a fight that I felt a lot of people felt like not only that Higo could win, but at the very least would be competitive in. So he's been a disappointment. So you got that. You got him moving up a weight class. How is he going to handle that as he's primarily at bantamweight? And with Pico, I mean, he's looked amazing, but the level of competition just isn't there. I mean, it's just there's a huge jump from Lee the Bulldog Morrison to Leandro Higo. So Bellator must know something, because this seems like a very risky matchmaking to me. We know how good Pico is. We know how fast he's progressing. He trains with AJ McKee, who we saw last week, got a very impressive highlight reel win himself. Again, you know, I imagine the odds for this fight are going to be out of line. I was telling people this morning, I mean, if Higo gets out of line, that line gets out of line, throw some money on him. There's some value here in Leandro Higo here. It's just the problem with him, though, is we haven't seen the Higo we saw in the regional scene in Bellator. That guy just hasn't shown up. He just hasn't been very good. He does hold the win over Steven Peterson, who's in the UFC. Should mention that, but he was also on Tough Brazil as well. But if he shows up, Aaron Pico could be in for a tough night. But if he doesn't, it's Pico's for the taking. That's kind of the way I look at this fight.
Joe, what are you looking for out of Pico? After that early stutter, it was hard to kind of guess what was coming for him. And I thought that by now they would have ran back the Zach Freeman fight. It seemed like natural. Like, why not do it? Why not co-main or main event a show with that instead of some of the stuff they do? But no, it seems like they're already thinking, no, he's passed up Freeman in that regard.
It's a strange scenario, and I see the risk in doing that rematch, especially as a co-main event, because what if Aaron loses again?
Yeah. Right?
That would be pretty, not detrimental to his career, but not a good look. In terms of taking on Higo, Mr. Lynch said it pretty succinctly there. What is it that Bellator knows that we don't?
Yeah.
Right? Because Aaron Pico taking on a guy in Leandro Higo, that's not a fight that I would put together. But unless I know something and I really want Pico to win, to get him that title shot and have that guy as my champion potentially, something's going on here. And if Pico can pull it off, and again, I don't see any odds for it right now. Everything I'm looking at only has the Gegard and Rory fight in terms of odds online. But I got 5 on whatever Higo may be, guys. And without even looking at the odds, I got 5 on it only because my brain it says Aaron right now, but Higo's experience, man, that's a veteran right there, boys.
This show is a loaded one, which I will talk about later, at least from a Bellator perspective, because you've got Andrei Koreshkov in action against Douglas Lima. This headlines a lot of Bellator shows, in my estimation, Joe. This is a very, very high-level fight. These are a couple of probably top 10 UFC welterweights, in my estimation.
Again, James, I'm not sure if you know, but no one's allowed to talk to me about Canadian fighters and the Lima brothers because I'm extremely biased. Douglas Lima, to me, is a fantastic fighter, and I could make the argument that he beat Rory MacDonald. He doesn't have the title. He deserves a rematch. He's probably going to get the rematch if he takes on or defeats Koreshkov. But these two guys matched up like this is just fantastic. And they hopefully will get a ton of eyeballs on them because of the co-main event and main event on this card. So I think it's a fantastic fight. And if you think I'm going to pick against Lima, you guys are nuts.
James, your thoughts?
Well, I just don't think you can pick against Lima based off their second fight. I mean, it was pretty well known that going into their first fight, Lima was injured, and it was evident. He was getting taken down. He was completely dominated in the fight from a wrestling standpoint. And in the rematch, Lima's striking was on display. He finished Koreshkov. So to me, I have to go with Lima in this fight. I think that, and I'm with Joe. I thought that was a very close fight against Rory MacDonald. Could have gone Lima's way. So if you're taking it from that perspective, he could still potentially be the champion here. And I think Douglas Lima overall is the better fighter. And I think he showed that in the rematch. So he's going to show it here coming up here as well. And to me, this sets up the perfect opportunity to get that rematch with Rory. Assuming Rory gets past John Fitch, which I believe is the fight that has to happen first.
This show, it's on DAZN. We're doing a live post show afterwards Saturday night, guys. So make sure you all join us. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe. This is one of the most perfectly constructed Bellator cards I've seen. You have a super fight, essentially, headlining the show. You have two legends in Rampage and Wanderlei Silva. You have two guys in Lima and Koreshkov who are established among Bellator fans, maybe not among some of the other people who will be drawn in by the top two fights. You have a high-level prospect, and then you have a women's fight where you're trying to establish that division and those names. This is the case, essentially, for several upcoming Bellator shows. And Joe, you spoke about it. Like, you've got all these people on the roster. Why can't you have at least 3 or 4 fights with intriguing names? The week after, Kimbo Slice's sons fighting. Lorenz Larkin and Eric Silva. Nelson versus Haritonov. Mitrione versus Bader. That's a decent card. I'll spend a Friday, Saturday night watching that show. How about 208? Fedor and Sonnen. Shlemenko in action. Ben Henderson in action. Chet Congo and Timothy Johnson. That's a decent show. Even the week after that, you have Cindy Dandois in a division they're trying to establish. You have Phil Davis against Nemkov. A Pitbull brother, of course, against Emmanuel Sanchez. Later on this year, King Mo and McGeary, Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth, Machida and Carvalho, headlined by McFarlane and Letourneau. These are some decent shows. These are some good shows. I like the way that they're constructing this, and as we are low on time, let's kind of make our picks. Rampage Jackson versus Wanderlei Silva, James. There's not a lot of breaking down technically what this is going to be. They're finally giving Quentin Rampage Jackson, who they signed for big money, what he calls his best contract ever, a guy who doesn't grapple or wrestle in Wanderlei Silva. I think this makes sense from every perspective.
Who has more gas left in the tank? That's pretty much how you have to look at this matchup. I got to go with the guy who's been a little bit more active in Jackson. I mean, there isn't much to break down here. It's two guys who are well past their prime. In the fourth fight, I got to go Jackson.
Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm edging towards Rampage Jackson this one here, only because Wanderlei hasn't been that active, and in that fight with Chael Sonnen, I thought it was going to be a completely different fighter with the amount of emotional investment that Wanderlei had in that fight just didn't come out. So I don't know what kind of emotional investment he has against Quentin Jackson since he's fought him 3 times, and I don't think Wanderlei's the same fighter as he was before. I'm going to go with Rampage in this one.
Main event, Mousasi, Rory MacDonald. MacDonald, the welterweight champion, against Mousasi, who has competed all the way up to heavyweight and done well, mind you. Mousasi sometimes can look like a world beater. Sometimes he can make the most elementary mistakes and just looks like his mind's not in it. James, you spoke to him this week. The interview is up on Fightful MMA, YouTube, all that good stuff. What did you get out of him?
We got lots of good stuff out of him, talking not only about this matchup, talking about the strength advantage in this fight as well. We have to look at the fact that Gegard, fought at light heavyweight in Strikeforce. He was the champion there, moved back down to middleweight where he's kind of been a mainstay, but we got Rory MacDonald coming up from welterweight. So is that going to play a factor? Gegard believes it will. Also we have to look at the fact that Mousasi, he's had some hiccups in his career, the Souza loss, the Uriah Hall loss, but hasn't really taken a ton of damage if you look at it. Rory has. So that's another factor to play into this one as well. I talked about a bunch of different things. Obviously, Jon Jones, talked to him about Machida signing there as well. But it's really good. And I want to know, or I want to point out, we're the only outlet that has a video interview with Gegard Mousasi at this point. I don't know what is going on with the media this week. There's been no coverage of this. I'm really disappointed in, the other bigger media shows. We haven't seen a peep about this card. This is one of their best cards this year, and I've seen, very little coverage. But like I said, you can check out an interview with Gegard on the site, and I'm picking him in this fight. I think he gets it done. I hate to go against a Canadian and Rory, especially with someone who's from my same province, but I just think Mousasi, with the fact that he's I believe size-wise they're similar. I think Mousasi's got like a 1-inch height advantage, Rory's got a slight reach advantage. But overall, I think the strength, the fact that Mousasi's fought bigger guys, I think will pay dividends in this fight, and I like Mousasi in the main event.
Yeah, Joe, that does seem to be a... Mousasi fighting someone who's not his size, that is not out of the ordinary. My God, he was in the Super Hulk tournament. He could have fought Canseco.
Yeah, as much as James is saying that, I mean, I think anyone that watches this podcast knows I generally pick against Rory MacDonald in most of his fights. I like going for anyone against Rory MacDonald. I think he's going to win this fight. I think Rory is going to have 2 belts wrapped around his waist within, 3 days, 4 days?
Couple of guys. Gegard Mousasi is only 33, but he's been fighting since 03. Rory MacDonald is 29, has been fighting since 05. That is wild to think. We have a live post show. After that, we have live coverage. Come in and make your picks. We have pros picks for this up as well. Check that out. Lots of coverage. We got it locked down, my friends. Follow James at Lynch on Sports. Follow Joe at Showdown Joe. Follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. Leave us a thumbs up, subscribe, and most importantly, let people know about it. I've also added new MMA content to Fightful Select. We're doing alternate fight commentary. I don't want to say in honor of Jon Jones coming back, but I did alternate commentary on his MMA debut, which had some of the worst all-time color commentary I've ever heard. Have either of you ever heard that?
No.
Go back. That's a homework assignment for you all. Watch Jon Jones's first MMA fight against Brad Bernard. It's 4 minutes long. The worst color commentary I've ever heard in my life. Guys, thank you all so much. Until next time, we are out.